Welcome to Module 2 of the budget, where we're going to go down through a list of line items and where I'll have some comments about what you need to be aware of and potentially do. That is not the intent of doing every single thing, because that's an impossibility, but just some of the areas that I became aware of after doing this for so many years. Again, this is a personal budget, and you can look at current and during retirement. You just make your adjustments as necessary. With food, I think it's probably fairly clear. With the groceries, alcohol, and tobacco, I don't think I really have to say much there, though you may find there's a difference with the restaurants between what you had as work-related, and certainly that's going to go down to about nil. On entertainment and recreation, I think vacations, which everybody tends to look at that they want to do, I'm going to maybe force that issue a little bit. If there's sufficient monies, try to do these once you are retired. I found too many people that have said, well, you know, now that I'm retired, I'm going to try and get some other stuff done, blah, blah. And though decent health is available for an awful lot of people, once you get old, you realize it can be tenuous at best, and I certainly know that myself. So if you have vacations and the travel that you want to do, try to do it up front, or as much as you can while you can, because it may go bye-bye in relatively short order. The recreational activities, and I put, biking and hiking and stuff like that, those, if you haven't been doing this, are something that you really should take advantage of, or force yourself to do, if you will, because the good health has to come along with the activities, the physical activities that you're doing, and mental as well, yes. But do try and put these in, and let's face it, a pair of hiking boots or something like that don't cost an awful lot, and they can make a world of difference for, the 25 or 30 years going forward. The, just as I said, minor items, cable TV, a lot of people are just getting tired of this and kind of cut the umbilical cord and go over to Netflix and Hulu and a number of other services going forward. So you may want to look at that, at least cutting back on, millions of channels about how to make mud out of a silk's purse. You just don't need that. Country club, again, that's personal, whatever, although a lot of people used it for business. But it's fine if you play golf, let's say, because I can see the validity of it. But just having a membership, I don't have to tell you anything about that. Anyway, in the next one, you'll see a computer. These are changing quite a bit in regards to the necessity of a formal home computer or even a laptop, considering all the iPads that are coming out there. And that's where really most of it is going now, the convenience of the smaller tablets. So if you still want a laptop, you're just going to find at least that the prices are going to be coming down considerably, and you can take advantage of that. And since I use a laptop because I want the big screen, I've had to go through various repairs, and it's just amazing how much cheaper everything has become. Anyway, gifts and contributions. One of the things that I found with a client years ago when the budget was not working was when you itemize stuff like this, it became clear that she was giving a lot of gifts to her nieces and nephews, far more than what she could afford. So it didn't take a blink of an eye, and those were, I think most of them were deleted. Again, I realize the religious convictions, but you have to remember you got 25 to 30 years to live. So you don't want to go back to a church or someplace like that, many years later, where you're going to have to try and get the money back from them simply so you can live. Transportation, a lot of people are keeping cars a lot longer than what they used to. Some of the maintenance is down. However, it's just that you can't fix the bleeding thing anyway, so you're going to have to bring it over to some place. I thought one that was interesting was parking tickets. This goes back a number of years in San Francisco. Due to the limited amount of parking that was available, she'd just end up getting a bunch of tickets every single month. So she had earmarked a certain cost for just parking tickets. I think it was $100 a month. Transportation, again, I think that's probably fairly obvious. A lot of that stuff generally goes down, unless you're doing the vacations, RV traveling, something of that expense. Clothing, usually you will find this down there as well, because most of this stuff has probably gone to work-related items. So now we get into, this gets tough now when you got child care, parent, and dependent care. This stuff is, and you'll find there's some other line items for the same thing. You know, for child care, you got daycare, and you know, you kind of figure that's within a certain budget. But when you're dealing, and particularly this is for the women that are sandwiched between their parents and the child, trying to care for them both. Now, if you're still working, you're going to have to figure on daycare, and even if you're retired, you know, I'm just, it's a tough one. This is going to be on an individual basis, because you can have a young child and you may have a mother or a father that's maybe going to have to move in with you, and this becomes a tough one, not so much from the financial issue, well, that is true, but the emotional issue, because it weighs heavily, most heavily on the wife. Personal care, again, some of this stuff is fairly obvious, so I don't think I have to really deal with that. I did put in there massages, again, I usually look at it for those that are caregivers. You really need to do some stuff for yourself, and this may seem to be an extravagance. I don't necessarily think it may be, depending on what other releases for that caregiver. This is really tough stuff. The education, depending on your scenario, you may wish to go back and get a degree or even another degree. And somebody always says, well, you know, if I'm 65 years of age, you know, I'm going to be 69 before I'm going to finish the degree. And your point being, when you get 69, it's maybe going to be 73. Your point being, remember, you may live up to around 90. So you just take this into consideration. Child tuition and room and board and whatever, you may have to, or think that it's your personal responsibility, I understand as a parent, that you're going to take money out of your retirement kitty in order to go over and help them get through college. This is a big ticket item which will require a fairly intensive review to figure out just what is the best thing. But you're robbing Peter to pay Paul in your retirement again. You have to look somewhere up around 90. When you start going over here on the obligations that you're paying currently, the only thing that, one of the things is Social Security. For those of you that are young, let's say under 50 years of age, what you are going to receive at retirement, I mean, you're obviously paying Social Security now, and at retirement that may be a very limited amount depending on if you're earning other money. But the Social Security itself, you're just not going to see the coverage that is available now to retirees. You're going to have to work longer, and you're going to get less Social Security, and you're going to have less assurance of what you're going to have at retirement due to the primary focus on 401ks. Life insurance, if you're younger, usually I figure, and remember, I'm still dealing with middle income America. I am not trying to play a game where you need to play some wholesale tax relief by dumping a huge amount of money that you have, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 into a variable life product. No. For the basic stuff, for most people, you can look at term. Whole life and universal life can provide some benefits, but when you really take a look at the additional cost, I just have a difficulty, and you don't know which policy to buy out of the numbers that are out there by the A+ rated companies. It's tough. There are ways to find the best companies, and then there are services that will help you find the best policy within those companies. If you're dealing with variable life insurance, I suggest you take a look at some of the other modules and what type of guarantees that you're paying for. You got to remember that listed or indicated in a couple of modules at least is the fact that there are conservative people that feel that there's apt to be a 50% decline twice in this next decade due to recessions and all the rest of the stuff. I am fully aware how well 2013 has turned out, but underlying this is a risk. The risks of investing always come first before you look at rewards. Not necessarily the way that it's done, but it's the way it should be. Disability insurance is mandatory for a lot of people. Some of you will get lucky and have an employer that will provide both long and short-term disability insurance. Otherwise, you may have to purchase this yourself. It is expensive. It is convoluted to figure out because these are contracts that supposedly determine, whether or not you are truly disabled at XYZ level. At least with life insurance, you're either dead or alive. But disability can be convoluted, but the odds of being disabled are far, far, far greater than dying. So it is something that you have to look at. I can only go so far with long-term care. This is a most difficult one because if you're a couple, there is a statistical reliance that you're going to need, one of you are going to need long-term care prior to death. What type of coverage that would be? Is it going to be Alzheimer's? Is it going to be something for 2 years, man, woman, and whatever? This is a tough one to deal with. You have to remember at this point in any case that Medicare, for all intents and purposes, does not care for long-term care and never has. There is coverage by Medicaid which will change in the future, but that is only for those that are financially indigent, usually with $2,000 or less in assets. Tricky situation here. This is one that some agents may be able to identify correctly, but you again are going to have to find the right policies and the right companies because a lot of the companies wrote this stuff before they had enough history, and they've simply got out of the business altogether. Child support probably speaks for itself. Business expenses, attorney's fees. Then you got other obligations. I don't know if we really need to touch on that. The savings. This is tough because when you look at the module on 401ks, it clearly shows the lack of defined benefit plans, and they're going over to the 401ks, which do not have a guarantee in them if the market has to, is going to decline due to 2004, which was a 44% loss, and 2008, which was a 57% loss top to bottom. What you're unfortunately finding in the 401ks, the TSAs, IRAs, KEOs, SEPs, certain types of other investment are the very high fees that are associated with these investments. It is, in my mind, not necessarily that difficult to figure out an asset allocation in certainly an up market, which was 2013, or one that may just stumble along. They can kind of work, but you simply are shooting yourselves in the foot by buying funds that are well over 1% in expense ratios, and then you're going to layer that with an advisor that may be charging 1% or more. You're going to take a big hit. It's not that the advisory services may not be worth something. Obviously they can be, but you will find in other comments just providing information to you that you may be able to research yourself is not worth the 1% on an ongoing basis. There's a lot of stuff involved with this. Individual securities, when it talks about even company stock up above certain options, individual securities, usually that's a no-no. You need to go through and review the commentary on diversification. It pretty much will terminate anything that you want to do with individual stocks, period. Most stuff is going to go over to mutual funds or ETFs, exchange-traded funds, and that's what you're going to be making up the very, very bulk of your asset allocation. I'm not going into the selection of commodities or hedge funds. You don't need that stuff. If you decide on something a little unique, keep it down to nothing more than 5%. Real estate ownership, single issue ownership. I know that after 2008, a lot of real estate has really gone back up in certain areas. I think it's looking closer to a bubble. I'm not really happy with it. There is a module on that as well about how you can compare the terms between real estate and securities and mutual funds, and it's well worthwhile to look at that. If you want to invest in an annuity and you're looking at 2014, remember that the interest rates, due to the tapering of quantitative easing, the interest rates are going to go up. So you're wanting to put a lot of money into a current annuity. You have to be a little careful because it may be worthwhile to wait just a bit to see if you can get some higher rates towards the end of the year. I realize there's a lot of things to consider, but the tapering is going to make a huge difference in the interest rates that will be offered on bonds in the future. A variable product of variable annuities and variable life insurance, even indexed annuities, these can work, but they are layered with an awful lot of fees. If you're already retired, you don't go down to these free seminars, and get a chicken dinner, and that's how you decide whether or not you want to buy one of these. That may seem like a very cynical comment for those of you who are looking at your parents that want to get out and socialize and they find these free dinners, blah, blah, blah. The odds of understanding this at a dinner are zero. The odds of a broker understanding them well before a seminar are usually very, very small. These are tough things. They can work, but they require a lot more effort than, again, a free dinner. Your home mortgage, a lot of that stuff is fairly obvious. On the telephone, you'll find a lot more people that are using, getting a major internet service that are just dropping the regular home phone and going with the mobile. Works fairly well. Earthquake insurance, just your basics here. Property insurance, fire insurance, make sure you're covered, and along with the inflation riders, and keep it current. Now, I lived out in California for a while, for a long time, and invariably when a fire went through or an earthquake, somebody found out, well, gee, I thought my insurance was ratcheting up each year with the cost of inflation, et cetera, and it didn't happen. The contracts were not written that way. Earthquake insurance, I had an owner that was approached by the agent and suggested that they reduce their earthquake insurance. And she came to me and I said, what the devil, you live on a hill in Berkeley on stilts. If a hummingbird comes by and hits one of your stilts, it's going to cost you a lot of money, never mind an earthquake. I think he's making a big mistake for the amount of money it's going to cost you, etc. Flood insurance, this is going to have a major issue for a lot of properties throughout the United States. The government is now just got sick and tired, and it should have done this a long time ago, of having flood damage and then paying to rebuild, and then to rebuild, and then to etc. It kept on going. So therefore, they are now getting out of the flood insurance business, where the individual is going to have to pay a much higher rate to get covered. What it means primarily is for those people that are going to try and sell a house in the wrong place now, they're going to find a significant devaluation of that property, simply because the federal government is not going to step in again and do it all over. It's going to be individual flood insurance coverage at a much higher price. I put down here a couple of things that people may not think about: the well maintenance, the snow removal. I think some of that is probably okay. This is the one that'll drive anyone to distraction, including myself: the medical. I don't know anything that one can do by putting in, a current amount without sitting down and really going through this. The Obamacare is going to take a long time for the dust to settle. You have Medicare insurance, and you have the Medigap insurance if you want to just stay with Medicare or go with an HMO. The one that is a huge ticket, again, is going to be the long-term care. I'm not necessarily now talking about a policy. I'm just talking about the cost for a nursing home at 2014 is about $87,000 a year. Assisted living may be about two-thirds of that. And the statistical evidence is shown elsewhere. But again, it's a decent time frame that you're going to have to look at if you are impacted by 3 of the ADLs, or one of the most insidious that you can possibly imagine is Alzheimer's and the senile dementia. I can assure you, looking forward up to 2050, there's going to be some wholesale changes as to how much money can be allocated to these people. We simply don't have enough money. But anyway, that's a separate issue that can really ratchet up the total cost for retirement. I put pets down in here, something you don't normally see, but for those of you that have pets, obviously I do, that if something happens to them, you got a pretty significant cost that can nip you in the bud a little bit. I would say that even given all the miscellaneous costs that might be thrown in there, I get down to the very bottom and I usually throw in another 5 to 10% just to cover for certain things. Now, somebody can say, well, you didn't have to go through all that work to get all the other line items identified. Yes, you did. It really is that important. At least if somebody is looking at this subtotal and an additional 5 or 10%, they have an understanding in their mind where there might be a little leeway, where you can maybe try to work with that budget and then do the numbers to figure out the kitty that you're going to need in order to be able to fund for the retirement. That's how you do this. Now, I mentioned some other things in the first module. about what you should expect and so forth for the use of retirement inflation. Returns don't go above 8%. I really do not think that's a very viable way at all. And don't try and put in 15 or 20 years for your lifetime. You're probably going to live longer. So this should cover some of the basic material for a budget. This has been Master Financial Education. You can go over to the website, but I really suggest that you take a look at the daily commentary if you happen to be truly involved with where some of this material comes from, what is read on an ongoing basis. This is not the fluffy stuff made for just the general overview by the consumers. It's master's level material, but I think it would be well worthwhile if you are so inclined to go through this. You'll find a wealth of information. Thank you very much.